The day the Veldori delegation arrived, every human on the Meridian had been told three things. Look calm. Speak slowly. Do not make sudden movements. The Veldori Collective was one of the oldest civilizations in the known galaxy. They had survived 2 extinction-level events, outlasted 4 fallen empires, and written the first universal code of deep space diplomacy. They were also, by every recorded account, extremely easy to frighten. Not in a small way. In a war-starting way. Captain Irene Solano had spent 2 weeks preparing her crew for this meeting. She had reviewed every cultural document the collective had shared. She had briefed every department. She had personally walked the docking corridor 3 times to make sure it was clean, quiet, and contained absolutely nothing alarming that IT was clean. It was quiet. It contained Rex. Nobody had planned for Rex. Rex was a monitor lizard. He belonged to Dara Webb, a junior technician who worked in the lower deck power relay station. Rex was large, as monitor lizards go. He was dark gray, with faint amber markings along his back. He had heavy-lidded eyes that made him look like he was always thinking about something very old and very slow. He was, in most respects, completely harmless, that he was also, at this exact moment, lying flat in the center of the main docking corridor with his belly against the warm floor panel and his eyes half closed, doing what he did best, absolutely nothing. Dara had not meant to lose him. She had left her quarters door open for 4 minutes while she ran to grab a calibration tool from the storage locker across the hall. 4 minutes was, apparently, all Rex needed. He had moved with what Dara later described as suspicious purpose for an animal that normally doesn't move at all, walked the full length of the lower deck, found the lift, and somehow ended up on the main corridor level. The lift part still bothered her. She had no explanation for that. She was currently 3 levels below, checking every warm surface she knew Rex liked, completely unaware that the Veldori delegation had just stepped off their docking tube and into the corridor above her. Gorik was the first through, that he was tall, even for a Veldori. 6-limbed, with 2 primary arms and 4 smaller secondary ones folded against his sides in the formal diplomatic resting position. His skin was a deep, shifting blue, the color of someone who was professionally confident and had prepared very hard for this moment. He took 3 steps in the corridor. He stopped. His skin went white, not pale, not lighter, white. The flat, total white of a Veldori body in the grip of something that had no name in polite language. Behind him, the rest of the delegation stopped too, because when a senior diplomat's skin went white, you stopped. You did not ask questions. You stopped and you waited. Soon his young aide peered around Gorik's arm. Rex had opened one eye, not both. Just one, the left one. It rotated slowly toward the delegation with the unhurried certainty of something that had never once in its life needed to move quickly. The tongue came out, long and dark and forked. It tasted the air twice, decided the air was acceptable, and went back in. Rex closed his eye again. Gorik's voice came out in a whisper. His translator badge caught it and pushed it into standard speech, but it could not remove the tremor underneath. That is a Vrin Kali. Sun did not know the word. Sun was young, born after the last cultural history revision, when the older myths had been moved to the restricted archive because the council decided that some fears were better left untaught to children. But Gorik knew. Gorik had grown up in a traditional household. His grandmother had told him the old stories. The Vrin Kali was not something from a distant world or an old war. It was something older than that. It was the thing the Veldori had fled when they first left their home planet 2,000 years ago. It was in their oldest cave drawings. It was in the first prayers ever recorded. It was a predator that did not chase. It did not need to. It simply waited, still as stone, patient as time. And when you thought you were safe, when you thought it had not noticed you, that was when it moved. Rex's tail shifted 6 inches to the left. Every member of the delegation took 1 step back. Then Rex yawned. It was a slow yawn. A massive, world-ending yawn. His jaw opened to a width that seemed deeply unreasonable. His teeth were visible. All of them. His tongue curled. His whole body stretched from the tips of his front claws to the end of his tail, and he made a low, long sound that was somewhere between a breath and a groan. Then he settled back down, heavier than before, and was still. The corridor was completely silent that Gorik's hand was shaking when he reached for his communicator. He kept his eyes on Rex. He did not look away. In the old stories, you never looked away. "This is Gorik," he said quietly. "Priority transmission to Admiral Dreth. Secure channel. Immediate." A pause. Then, "Go ahead, Gorik." "The humans have a Vrin Kali," Gorik said. "It is on their ship. It is alive. I'm looking at it right now." The channel was silent for 4 full seconds. Then Dreth said, "Say that again." Rex snored. The transmission reached Admiral Dreth on the bridge of the Veldori warship Undying Patience, which was docked 2 berths away from the Meridian at Waypoint Karis. Dreth was a broad, copper-skinned Veldori with the kind of stillness that came from 40 years of command. He did not rattle easily that he listened to Gorik's report. All of it. Twice. Then he sat down, which was something his crew had never seen him do in the middle of shift. "Give me a visual," he said. "Sir, the humans have not given us corridor access on their ship." "Then give me Gorik's feed. He has an eyepiece." "Pull it." The feed came through. Grainy, slightly tilted because Gorik's head was not entirely steady, but clear enough. The corridor, the floor panels, and Rex, lying there like a fallen monument, tail resting against the wall, chest rising and falling in the slow rhythm of something that had no schedule and no concern. Dreth stared at the screen for a long time. "How large?" he said quietly. "Approximately 1.4 meters, sir. From head to tail. Weapons status on the fleet. You want me to go to alert? Standby. Not alert. Standby." Dreth kept watching the screen. "And somebody find out everything we have on Vrin Kali sightings in this sector. Every record. Every report. Going back 200 years. On the Meridian, nobody had told Captain Solano anything yet. She was still in the preparation room, going over the diplomatic agenda with her senior staff, when her communications officer knocked and opened the door with a specific kind of face that meant something had happened, and it was not small. "Captain, you need to come to the main corridor." Solano looked up. "The delegation has arrived?" "Yes." "They are still in the corridor." "Still in the corridor, meaning what exactly?" The officer looked at the ceiling for a moment. "Meaning they have not moved, ma'am. In about 12 minutes. There is also a situation involving Webb's lizard." Solano closed her folder. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, "Of course there is." 3 levels below, Dara was starting to get genuinely worried. She had checked every warm vent panel on Deck 4. She had looked under both cargo shelves in the relay room. She had even checked the small alcove behind the secondary water recycler, which was Rex's second favorite spot when he was feeling private. Nothing. She went back into the corridor and almost ran into Dr. Finoka, the ship's xenobiologist, who was heading somewhere in a hurry with a data pad under his arm. "Fun, have you seen Rex?" Fun stopped. He looked at her. Something moved across his face that she could not immediately identify. It was not alarm. It was closer to the expression of someone who had just understood a joke that was also a disaster. "Where was he last?" Fun asked very carefully. "My quarters. I left the door open for a few minutes, and now I cannot find him. He got into the corridor somehow." Fun looked up at the ceiling, then down at the floor, then at Dara. "Deck 1, he said. Dara felt something cold move through her. "The delegation is on Deck 1. "Yes," said Fun. "They are." He paused. "So is Rex, I think." There was a silence. Then Finn started laughing. He tried not to. He pressed his hand over his mouth and turned away, and his shoulders shook for a few seconds before he got himself back under control and turned around again with watering eyes. "Sorry," he said. "It is not funny. We should go up there." It was a little funny. Dara did not think so yet, but later she would. They took the lift to Deck 1. Solano was already there, standing at a careful distance from the corridor entrance, watching. The Veldori delegation had not moved. Gorik was still white. His secondary arms were folded so tightly against his body that they looked like they had been pressed there by some external force. 3 members off the delegation behind him had their eyes completely closed, which was apparently a Veldori response to extreme stress. Rex had moved, approximately 3 inches to the left. He was now also licking the corridor wall with long, slow strokes, tasting the metal plating with what appeared to mild professional interest. Solano turned when she heard Dara arrive. Her expression was very controlled. "Is that your lizard?" she said. It was not a question. "Yes, Captain. I am so sorry. I do not know how he got the lift to work. We will discuss that later." Solano looked back at the delegation. Right now, the bigger issue is that their senior diplomat appears to believe Rex is some kind of mythological predator and has been transmitting priority distress calls to their fleet for the past 15 minutes. Dara stared. Rex. Rex chose this moment to finish licking the wall, turn around with great effort, and face the delegation directly. He stared at them all with the deep, heavy gaze off a creature that had no opinions and no plans and nowhere to be. Gorik made a very small sound. Dara walked forward. She walked straight down the corridor, past the frozen delegation, reached Rex, and picked him up by the midsection the way she always did, hoisting him up and draping him over her shoulder like a long, warm, scaly scarf. Rex made a low, grumbling sound and hooked one claw loosely over her collar. His tail hung down her back. His head rested near her ear. He looked deeply put out by the interruption. "Rex," Doris said, in the tone of someone who had said this many times before. "You know you're not allowed in the hallways." Rex said nothing. He was already closing his eyes. The entire Veldori delegation watched a human carry the ancient apex horror off-tier civilization away, like a mildly inconvenient piece of luggage. Gorik fainted. He did it neatly, which said a lot about his training. All 6 limbs folded beneath him in a slow, organized collapse, and he went straight down without hitting anything or making a sound. Sun looked at the floor where Gorik now was, then up at Dara's retreating back, then at the floor again. "Should I?" Sun began. "Yes," said the diplomat behind him. "Get him up." Gorik recovered in the medical bay. He did not enjoy the experience. The human medical officer, a calm woman named Dar Pell, had given him a cold compress and a glass of water and explained twice that he had fainted. Gorik knew he had fainted. He did not need it explained. He needed to know whether the Vrinkali was still on the ship. It was. Dara had taken it back to her quarters. This did not comfort Gorik as much as Dr. Pell seemed to think it should. An hour later, Gorik sat in the Meridian's conference room. His skin had moved from white back to a pale gray, which was not his usual color, but was at least not the color of a diplomatic incident. Sun sat beside him. Across the table sat Captain Solano, Dr. Finokafor, and Dara Webb, and Rex. Dara had put Rex on the table because Solano had asked her to bring him, and Rex had walked 3 steps to the center of the table, turned one full slow circle for no clear reason, and lain down. He was now asleep. His breathing was deep and even, and it made a faint sound like a slow engine running far away. Gorik watched him the way a person watches something they cannot stop watching even though they want it out on the screen at the end of the conference room. Admiral Dreth's face was visible. His arms were crossed. His expression was the expression of a man who had been told something impossible and was still deciding what to do with it. "I want a full explanation," Dreth said. "Of course," said Solano. "What would you like to know? What that creature is, what it is doing on your vessel, why your crew member is not afraid of it, and why," he paused, "it appears to be sleeping." "I can answer all of those," Solano said. "It is a monitor lizard. It is on our vessel because Specialist Webb keeps it as a pet. She is not afraid of it because it is harmless, and it is sleeping because that is mostly what it does." Dreth said nothing for a moment. "A pet," he repeated. "Yes. You keep it. Voluntarily. On your ship. She has had him since she was 17, Solano said. He came from a rescue shelter on Earth. She filled out the paperwork to bring him aboard. It is all properly documented. His name is Rex." Another silence. "Its name," Dreth said, "is Rex." "Yes." Dreth's jaw moved slightly. He looked like a man doing very difficult mathematics in his head. "In our records, the Vrinkali is listed as one of the most dangerous predators ever documented in Veldori historical archives. Ancient accounts describe it as a creature of total patience. A hunter that waits longer than its prey can hold hope. Temples were built to warn against it. Prayers were written. Our people fled their home world in part because of what creatures like that represented. Dr. Okafor leaned forward with great interest. Fascinating. On Earth, monitor lizards were considered dangerous omens in several early human cultures as well. They're old myths, warning stories, the whole tradition. He paused. We got over it and started keeping them in tanks. Rex here is about 14 years old, and his favorite thing in the world is lying on warm surfaces. Dreth stared at Okafor. You got over it, Dreth said slowly. Yes, and then you made them pets. Some people did, yes. Dara did. He is very well cared for. Dreth looked at Rex. Rex's back leg twitched slightly in whatever dream he was having. Then it went still. Gorik, who had been quiet since sitting down, spoke without fully meaning to. Does it not move quickly? He asked. He was looking at Rex. The old records say they are deceptively fast when they choose to be. He can move fast, Dara said honestly, when he smells food, or sometimes when he hears my voice from another room. She thought about it. He once crossed the entire length of the lower deck in about 4 minutes, which was surprising. Gorik absorbed this. For minutes. He wanted to find me, Dara said simply. Something changed in Gorik's expression. It was small, and he controlled it quickly. But it was there. Sun had been very still since sitting down. Now Sun leaned forward, just slightly, and looked at Rex with open curiosity. The delegation aide had none of Gorik's history with the old stories. To Sun, Rex was simply a strange creature that was large and gray and breathing slowly and seemed, as far as Sun could tell, to be completely at peace with its situation. Sun reached out one small limb, very slowly, and touched the back of Rex's neck. Rex did not move. His breathing continued. His eyes stayed closed. Sun pressed a little more. The scales were firm and smooth under the touch. Then Rex rolled that he did it with no warning and no urgency. He simply shifted his full weight to one side and rolled on his back, legs loosely up, belly completely exposed, and let out a long and total sigh. Sun froze. Then very carefully, Sun scratched the pale belly scales that Rex's back left leg kicked once. Slowly, then stopped. The conference room was very quiet. Dreth, on the screen, watched his lead diplomat's young aide scratch the belly off the ancient apex predator of Veldori mythology. He watched Rex's leg kick. He watched Sun's expression go from terror to something that had no name, yet but was clearly heading somewhere warm. Dreth said nothing for a full 10 seconds. Then he said, to someone off-screen, "Move the fleet to standard hold. We are not going to alert." He did not explain why. He simply closed the channel. The Veldori historians arrived by data transmission. There were 4 of them, connecting remotely from the fleet's research vessel, and they had been pulled from their regular work on very short notice. They whirled, all 4 of them, and they carried the specific energy of people who had spent decades in quiet rooms with old documents and were not accustomed to being summoned urgently for anything. Admiral Dreth had contacted them with a single instruction: find every recorded reference to the Vrinkali in the Veldori Historical Archive and send it to the conference room on the Meridian immediately. IT was a lot of material. Gorik, Sun, Solano, Dara, and Dr. Okafor sat around the table, while images and documents filled the screen on the far wall. Cave drawings from 2,000 years ago. Temple carvings. An ancient painted warning frieze that had once hung in a Veldori city gate. Illuminated manuscript from the early colonial period that a pressed metal ceremonial shield with a Vrinkali etched into the center. Rex was on the table. Everyone kept looking between the screen and Rex. The resemblance was, Dara had to admit, genuinely uncomfortable. The ancient Veldori artist had not been wrong. The proportions were right. The heavy body low to the ground. The long tail. The broad, flat head with the deep-set eyes. The slightly open jaw with the tongue just barely visible. One of the cave drawings showed a Vrinkali lying perfectly still at the entrance to a cave while a group of small Veldori figures stood frozen at a distance. The Veldori figures in the drawing had white skin. Rex was currently lying in almost exactly the same position. He had shifted during a presentation to rest his chin on the edge of the data pad in front of Okafor's seat, and he was looking at the screen with both eyes half open, as if he was also reviewing the historical record and finding it somewhat familiar. "So," Solano said carefully. "He does look like it." "Considerably," said one of the historians, with a tone that suggested this was the understatement of their career. "But he is not dangerous," Solano said. "No," said Dara. "He has never hurt anyone. He is very calm. He does not bite unless he thinks your fingers are food, and even then it is not serious." "Unless he thinks your fingers are food," Gorik repeated. "I wrap them before feeding time," Dara said. "Standard procedure." Gorik wrote something down. Doctor Okafor had been reviewing the historical documents with barely contained delight for the past 20 minutes. He leaned forward now and pointed at the screen. "This is the interesting part to me. Look at the behavior descriptions in these records. Patient, still, watchful, strikes without warning, waits for prey to come close." He looked at Rex. "Monitor lizards on Earth are ambush hunters. They are patient. They do move fast when they want to. All of this is technically accurate." "That is not reassuring," Gorik said. "No, but it is interesting," Okafor said. "Humans had the same kind of fear response to monitor lizards historically. In some African and South Asian cultures, they were considered omens. Bad luck, signs of death nearby. People avoided them. Some communities actively tried to drive them away." He picked up his water glass and took a sip. Then somewhere along the way, some people decided to try keeping them. And it turned out that they are quite easy to care for once you understand them. They do not want to fight. They want warmth and food and a safe place to rest. Rex here is a perfect example. You simply decided, Gorik said slowly, that the fear was not worth keeping. "Some people did," Okafor said. "Not everyone, but enough." Gorik looked at Rex for a long moment. "On our world, the Vrin Kali represented the end of hope. There are prayers that are still spoken today at funerals that reference the Vrin Kali. When something is over, when there is nothing left to do, you say, the Vrin Kali is still. The waiting is finished." The room was quiet. Rex sneezed. It was a small sneeze, sudden and undignified, and his whole head shook with it. He blinked twice, looking briefly surprised by himself, and then settled back down with his chin on the datapad. So made a soft sound. It might have been a laugh. Gorik looked at his aide, then back at Rex. "Where did you find him?" Gorik asked Dara. His voice had changed. It was still formal, but something underneath had shifted. A question that wanted a real answer. "A shelter," Dara said. "On Earth. He was found in an empty apartment. Someone had kept him and then left. Just left him there." She paused. "He was underweight when they found him. He needed about a year of proper care before he was healthy." Gorik was very still. "Someone left him," he said. "Yes. And you took him. I saw his picture on the shelter's listing," Dara said. "He looked very serious in the photo, like he had important things to think about." She looked at Rex with the calm affection of someone who had known an animal for a long time, although it needed someone to think those things with. Gorik put down his pen. He looked at the ancient drawings on the screen. He looked at Rex. He looked at Dara, the symbol of inevitable doom. He said quietly, mostly to himself, "Found alone in an empty room. Taken in. Given a name." Nobody answered. There was not much to add. Rex put one paw on top of the datapad and closed his eyes completely. Gorik requested the cultural briefing the next morning that he asked for it formally through the proper channels, using the correct diplomatic request format. He submitted it before the ship's first shift began, which Mina had been awake for some time thinking about it. Solano approved it without hesitation. She told Dara, who told Okafor, and the three of them gathered again in the conference room with Gorik and Sun. Rex was also there. Rex was always going to be there. He had decided the conference table was his table now and arrived before anyone else, having let himself out of Dara's quarters through a gap in the door panel that Dara had not yet managed to fix. Gorik sat down across from Dara with a fresh notebook, his pen ready, and the focused expression of a professional who intended to understand something fully before he left the room. "Tell me about him," Gorik said. "Everything. His history. His habits. What he hates. What he does when he is unhappy. What he does when he is content." Dara talked for a long time. She told Gorik about the shelter, about the first year when Rex was thin and slow and would not eat regularly and needed to be coaxed with food placed near his head so he did not have to move far. She told him about the heat lamp she had bought with 3 weeks of saved pay because the shelter-issued one was not warm enough. She told him about the frozen mice, which she ordered in bulk and thawed one at a time, because Rex preferred them at a specific temperature and would simply stare at her with profound disappointment if they were too cold. She told him about the vet visits, about the one time Rex had a respiratory infection and needed medicine twice a day for 2 weeks, and how she had Lornetto wrap him in a towel to give him the drops because he did not enjoy it, but also never fought her seriously, just made his feelings known and then accepted it. She told him about how he knew her voice, how he would move toward the sound off it from across a room, how he had once walked the full length of the lower deck, operated a lift by leaning on the panel, and found his way to the main corridor, apparently because she had not been in their quarters for a few hours, and he had decided to locate her. Gorik wrote steadily throughout all of this. He did not interrupt. When Dara finished, he looked down at his notes for a moment. "How old will he be?" he asked. "When he reaches the end of his life." "Monitor lizards can live about 30 to 40 years if they are well cared for," Dara said. "Rex is 14, so he has a long time yet, I hope." "And what will you do?" Gorik said carefully, "as that time approaches?" Dara considered the question the way it deserved to be considered. "Make sure he is comfortable," she said. "Good food, warm spots, a good vet who knows his history. Make sure he is not in pain. Make sure he is not alone." She looked at Rex. "He has been with me for 11 years. I will be with him for however many he has left." Gorik was quiet for a while. He looked at Rex, who was lying with his chin resting in the table edge, eyes half open, watching nothing in particular with the vast and peaceful attention of a creature that had no unfinished business. Sun, who had been listening quietly from the side seat, said, "He does not seem afraid of anything." "He is not," Dara said. "He never has been. Some animals are anxious by nature. Rex is not. He is just settled. He has always been like that." Sun nodded slowly. Even when he was sick, even when things were not good, he was still settled. "Yes." Sun looked at Gorik. Gorik was looking at his notebook. In the notes, Gorik had written something and then stopped. He had been looking at the same line for a full minute. Okafor, sitting at an angle, could not read it, but he could see that it was short. Only a few words. Gorik finally looked up. "In our culture," he said, "there's a concept we call Velshera. It does not translate well into standard speech. The closest meaning is something like, the peace that lives on the other side of the worst thing." He paused. "It is considered the highest state of Veldori can reach. Most of us spend our whole lives trying to find it and never quite do." He looked at Rex. "Your lizard," he said, "looks like he has always had it." The room was very quiet. Dara looked at Rex. Rex looked at nothing in particular and breathed his slow and easy breath, his tail resting loose, his whole body still and warm. "I think he just never lost it," Dara said. Okafor, who had been quiet for longer than usual, said, "You know, I think that is what confused every species that ever encountered humans with their animals. We did not tame the things we were afraid of. We just kept company with them until the fear stopped feeling necessary." Gorik looked at him. "And if the fear comes back?" Gorik asked. Okafor shrugged. "Then you scratch behind the ears until it doesn't." He nodded at Rex. Rex had no ears to speak of. Okafor meant it loosely, but Sun reached out and scratched Rex behind the jaw hinge anyway, where the scales were softer. Rex's whole expression shifted in a way that had no naming in any language but meant something warm and true in all of them. Gorik watched this and wrote one more line in his notebook and closed it. He did not show anyone what it said. But his skin, for the first time since he had stepped onto the meridian, had returned to its natural deep blue. The treaty was signed on the third day. It happened in the same conference room where Rex had spent most of the past 72 hours, which Gorik had suggested and Solano had agreed to without asking why. The table had been cleaned. The chairs had been arranged properly. Someone had put a small arrangement of decorative items along the center in an attempt at formality. Rex was lying beside them with his chin on the table, looking at the decorations with mild suspicion. The signing itself did not take long. Gorik was precise and efficient when he worked, and Solano matched his pace. They moved through the clauses, confirmed the language, and signed where signatures were needed. Dreth appeared on screen for the final ratification, said the formal words, and the Meridian's communications officer logged the completed agreement into the Galactic Registry. It was, by any measure, a successful diplomatic outcome. Gorik capped his pen and looked across the table at Solano. "That went well," Solano said. "Better than expected," Gorik agreed. There was something dry in his voice that had not been there 3 days ago. Solano recognized it as a sense of humor that had survived considerable stress. Afterward, when the formal part was done and the screen had gone dark and the room had relaxed into something quieter, Gorik remained seated. He did not move to leave. He looked at Rex. Rex had pushed one of the decorative items off the table. It had made a small sound when it hit the floor. Rex was watching the spot where it had been with deep satisfaction. "There is something I want to tell you," Gorik said. He was speaking to Solano and Dara both. "Something I have not said outside of the Veldori historical community for a very long time." Solano waited. "The Vrinkali myth," Gorik said, "is older than our space program, older than our written language. The earliest versions of it are scratched into stone in the oldest caves on our first world. And in the original version, the very oldest one, the meaning is not what it became later." He looked at his hands. Later generations changed the story. They made it only about danger, about the predator that waits. But in the original version, there is a second part. He was quiet for a moment. In the oldest version, he said, if a Veldori ever encountered a Vrinkali and was not taken, it meant something. It meant the worst had already passed. It meant the creature had looked at you and found nothing left to wait for, because you had already survived everything that could be survived. You were free. It paused. We lost that part of the story somewhere along the way. Dara looked at Rex. Rex was now attempting to reach the fallen decorative item in the floor by hanging one arm over the edge of the table and stretching as far as possible without actually climbing down. He was not going to make it. He did not stop trying. "I am choosing," Gorik said quietly, "to remember the old version." Nobody said anything. There was nothing to add to that. Sun exchanged contact details with Dara before leaving. It was done formally through the ship's communication register, but Sun also wrote a personal note that said, simply, "Please send updates." About Rex. When you can, Dara sent the first one before the delegation ship had finished detaching from the docking port. A photograph, taken from above. Rex asleep on the floor, off her quarters, directly on top of the heat vent, bathed in warm light, one paw stretched forward and one tucked under his chin. She added no caption. None was needed. Sun received it and sat with it for a while before showing Gorik. Gorik looked at the photograph for a long time. Then he sent it, without comment, to Admiral Dreth. Dreth, on the bridge of the Undying Patience, looked at the image of Rex asleep in his warm light. He sat with it for about 30 seconds. Then he closed it and pulled up his incident report, which he had now rewritten 3 times. The first version had described a potential biological threat requiring fleet assessment. The second had referenced an unclassified creature of possible Vrinkali origin requiring further study. The third, which he had started that morning, had stalled on the second sentence that he deleted the third version. He started again. He wrote, "Potential security concern investigated and resolved. No hostile acción requerido. Diplomatic proceedings completed successfully. All parties departed without incident." He paused with his hand over the submit key. Then he added one more line, which no one who read the report later would fully understand. Creature confirmed non-hostile. Behavioral notes forwarded to Cultural Archive for review of pre-colonial historical classification. He submitted it and closed the file and did not look at it again. The Meridian undocked from Waypoint Karis 2 hours later. Solano watched Waypoint shrink in the rear display and then went back to her desk to start the next briefing. Okafor went to his lab and spent an afternoon writing up notes on Veldori stress chromatics that he was fairly sure would be published widely. Dara went back to the power relay station on Deck 4. Rex was asleep on the warm vent in her quarters. He had been there for most of the day. He had no idea that 12 warships had been in standby, alert because of him. He had no idea that ancient drawings of his kind hung in Veldori archives, or that his yawn had been transmitted as a priority distress signal, or Theta Senior Diplomat had fainted at the sight of him, or that somewhere on a fleet warship, an admiral had quietly added a monitor lizard's photograph to his personal files, that he knew that the vent was warmed, he knew that Dara would come back, that he knew that when she did, there would likely be a thawed mouse, that he had, in his long and unhurried opinion, everything he needed. He slept well into the evening, deeply and completely unbothered, the way he had always slept, the way he would always sleep, the ancient and total sleep off something that had never once in its life been afraid of the dark.